They say you should always be yourself, unless you can be a sheep who defies death, channels one elder god, and battles the others and builds cute cult sheep communes in the woods for all of his friends. This guy. You can be him. I'll show you.
The first thing you need is some sort of fabric that reminds you of a sheep. I used this white sherpa, which is fluffy and warm and attracts my cat at an unreasonable speed, so it checks all the boxes. Next, you'll need a spacesuit. Why? I was hoping you wouldn't ask, because the answer is really pretty boring, but I wanted this costume to be out of this world, and in my experience, sheep and astronauts are about the same shape. I folded the spacesuit in half, pinned it to the sherpa, and cut out 2 almost exact copies of everything except for the arms and legs. Sheep, of course, don't have arms and legs. That's how you can tell them apart from astronauts. I cut out 2 more almost exact copies of the first almost exact copies, then designated the bigger version as the back of my sheep costume and pinned them together at the center back. Then I got ready for the first actual sewing in this project by clearing my desk, putting the right color thread in my machine, and convincing my cat that he should get out of my chair. Immediately. Post haste. Pronto. Dude sweet. Anytime now, dude. Success! I sewed that first seam and discovered 2 things. 1, even with a roller foot, sewing 2 layers of sherpa together is a little like trying to swim through jello, and 2, setting up my sewing machine right inside the front door makes it very difficult for my husband to sneak surprises into the house.
I see nothing.
But if one surprise is foiled, husbands will try again and leave video messages like this for me to find when I'm editing. I pinned the 2 front pieces onto the sides and the shoulders before swimming through some more jello. At that point, I should have stopped and put in the zipper, but I was kind of anxious to see how it would fit, so instead I pinned the bottom half of the front opening, sewed it, pinned the inseam, sewed that, and tried it on. Yeah, it fits fine. I make no apologies for putting in zippers late. I pinned it into one side, sewed it, and didn't bother to switch to a zipper foot because sherpa is so fluffy you wouldn't be able to tell if I did it correctly anyway. Then I pinned it into the other side. We now pause our regularly scheduled broadcast for a special message from the closest thing we could find to a sheep. I finished sewing the zipper in, and look! It works perfectly! But there was a hole where the zipper wasn't quite as long as I had intended it to be. I would advise that you get a longer zipper, because in order to get into this suit, I do have to do an interpretive dance mixed with a shimmy, mixed with a plea to the elder gods, but I just decided to sew the whole shut and roll with it. After discovering the jello situation, I knew there was no way I wanted to hem the through doodles or leg holes with the traditional fold over and fold over again procedure. But since the sherpa had been shedding enough to turn my sewing room into a fluffy winter wonderland, I did want to finish all the edges. So I sewed bias tape as close to the edge as possible, then folded it over once, and only once, and I hand sewed the bias tape to the inside of the sherpa until everything was sealed up so nicely. Well, okay, almost. On the legs, I did stop before it was entirely sealed up, cut pieces of elastic about as long as the garters make, and threaded them into the folded over bits. I sewed those elastic pieces into a loop, tugged them all the way into the leg holes, and then sealed them all the way up. That was it for the sheep body. It was time to cut out the hood. I bought a pattern online, but I ended up drawing my own shape on top of their pattern, and I didn't read any of their instructions, so basically I just made it up as I went along, but tricked myself into confidence by pretending it was somebody else's idea. There's a life hack for you. After I cut out all 8 hood and ear pieces, I stacked the black ear pieces on top of the fuzzy ear pieces, sewed them together all around the curved edges, then I flipped them inside out and folded them just around half until they definitely looked like ears. I sewed the 2 fluffy hood pieces together, also only at the curved edges, until it definitely looked like a hood. Yep, that's the hood. I tested a couple of different places for the ears and marked the ones I liked best with pins, without poking myself in the head. It's not a crucial step, but it does generally improve morale. Then I sliced the hood right open, where I had marked it. Cause destruction is fun, and also we're gonna pin the ears in like a fluffy little sandwich and sew it back together as if we didn't just cut a giant hole in all our hard work. It's all very satisfying. If, unlike me, you remember that the sheep is supposed to have horns, you can sew them into this sandwich too. I did cut out a lining for the hood, so I put it together real fast, then sewed it to the outside edge. Twice, because that just helps keep everything in its place. Then I flipped it right side out and pinned it to the body. Since this would be my last time swimming through jello, I rejoiced, and Mr. Meows upped the difficulty by helping. I rewarded him by letting him be the first one to try on the whole suit, and he didn't seem very impressed, probably because the lining was still loose and flippy-flopping everywhere, but I hand-sewed that down, and the suit was completely finished. To make that cape, you're gonna need some paper, which is in fact a pattern that I made in Photoshop, mostly by drawing 3/4 of a circle and dividing it into even pieces, but then I had to tape it together, add some points at the bottom of each piece, and I ended up with this. Sort of. When I went to go cut them out, I did realize that the points were not going to end up exactly where I wanted them, so I made the front pieces bigger and the back pieces smaller, and that's why they look like this now. I cut out 2 of every piece. and began pinning them together, starting with the 3 pieces at the back. I sewed that up, completely jello-free, pinned on the next 2 pieces, sewed, pinned on the last 2 pieces, sewed, and I had a cape. And an identical cape twin, because we're lining this thing too. On one cape, I pinned a line of white ribbon, which was sort of hard because the ribbon was not stretchy and the fabric was, and the cape had points that needed to be finagled. And Mr. Meows thinks that all ribbons are snakes and that I cannot handle snakes all on my own because I'm shockingly bereft of claws or any other ways to defend myself. But it all got easier when one of us got the hang of it and the other decided to take a nap. I sewed the ribbon down with a zigzag stitch on either side while Mr. Meows patrolled. I guess to make sure that the ribbon snake didn't get away, or bite me, or just steal too much attention away from the more deserving fluffy feline pets. Then I stacked the lining perfectly on top, sewed all the way around the edge, and clipped off every single corner because my scissors looked hungry. Next, I took a break and practiced cutting out rectangles. Long rectangles, shorter rectangles. I folded one of the long rectangles in half and pinned both ends and sewed them in place. My scissors needed another snacky snack, and then I took 2 of the smaller rectangles and pinned them together all over to fulfill their lifelong dream of becoming a porcupine. I sewed them together, but left a little space on one edge so I could flip it inside out. Oop, snack time again. And you know, I'm not really sure if the porcupine dream really came together, so let's try it again. Yeah, that's a lot better. I sewed all the way around the edge and added a strip of Velcro to one side. Now that I had all the pieces of the cape mostly constructed, it was time to put them together. I flipped the cape right side out, realized I was going to have to do something to help make it crisp. It looked pretty frumpy so far. But I went ahead and pinned and sewed one edge of the long rectangle, also known as the collar, to the neck of the cape. To help the collar stand up, I slipped a piece of white felt inside, then pinned the other edge of the rectangle to the inside of the cape. It took a little time to hand sew it on, and a little more time to pin all the way around the very long outside edge of everything, as well as pinning that porcupine rectangle to one side of the front opening. But then I sewed all the way around, twice. That made it look crisp as a chip, but also I needed to sew the porcupine rectangle in anyway, so to finish everything off, I pinned the second half of the Velcro to the other side of the opening. So, voila! A cape. The crown was supposed to be the easiest part of the costume by far, so I saved it for last. All you need is a rectangle of foam approximately twice the size of your face. I cut myself a little paper pattern and I used it to scallop the top edge of the foam so that when I looped it all together it would look wrong, but don't worry, I'll figure that out in about 10 seconds. I also cut 2 little squares out of the scraps and 2 pieces of ribbon twice as long as the squares. And then I glued all of those pieces together in a way that would have remained a complete and shrouded mystery because I forgot to press record while executing said gluing, except that I decided to check the reference image and...
This is the shape it's supposed to be. This is the one I made it first.
It's fine. It's perfect. We'll just cut it out again. And then I forgot to press record again when I glued this one together.
So hit record. It doesn't actually do anything. That'll be perfect.
I glued the main part of the crown into a circle. Then I folded each ribbon in half to make a little loop and glued one loop to each square and glued the squares to the crown just inside on opposite sides. That way, I can attach the crown with safety pins from the inside of the hood and not have to worry about it flying off. I painted an eye on the front in little dabbing strokes. I liked the idea of giving it texture, making it look a little bit like a cousin to the eye of Sauron. So I really packed the paint on for each little dab and made it look all mottled and fiery and... That, my friends, is how you make a sheepish little cult leader.
Please do not actually start a cult. Cults have not been approved for infants, children, teenagers, adults, aliens, or the elderly. Excessive sheeping may be harmful to health and lead to delusion, exuberance, excessive hugging, exaggerated promises, overheating, and other life-threatening conditions. For the health and safety of you, your family, your friends, and your pet hamster, please sheep responsibly.